Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today is really on the philosophy of athletic excellence, specifically in high-level volleyball. We're going to be looking at the essential drivers, both psychological and operational, that push a successful athlete toward continuous, sustained personal improvement.
And we're really digging into the core mechanism of that demanding progression. The question is, does an athlete's path from, let's say, good to elite rely more heavily on an intrinsic self-driven engine of reflection and personal ownership? Or does that internal drive require a really rigorous, structured external framework, something provided by objective data, the coaching staff, and team accountability?
Precisely. That is the central question right there. Is continuous improvement fundamentally rooted in the athlete's capacity to manage themselves, to manage their internal metrics? Or must it be founded on that structured external accountability? I'm going to argue that the ultimate path to sustained improvement is fundamentally internal. It's self-managed. The athlete has to be the primary agent of their own growth.
And I'll be presenting the case that while that self-drive is, of course, vital, it's pretty directionless without the necessary foundation of external structure. That rigorous accountability is what translates the will to improve into, actionable, measurable, competitive progress.
I accept that premise that drive is universal, but I think we often confuse the will to win with the actual process of excellence. The competition is at its core singular. It's about striving to be better tomorrow than you are today. You're competing against your past self, not necessarily others. This is why preparation, not just desire, is what defines elite status. As Bobby Knight famously put it, the key is not the will to win. Everybody has that. It is the will to prepare to win that is important. And that preparation, that is an entirely individual commitment.
I see why you emphasize that internal commitment. I do. But I would frame the preparation part a little differently. For preparation to be effective, it has to be formalized. It needs specific, measurable goals, the whole SMART framework, for example. But these goals have to be tethered to a system of external accountability to make sure they're actually productive and not just, aspirational.
And the mechanism for that internal formalization is precisely the athlete's own self-management practices. So, for example, consider the use of athlete journals. These are not just diaries. They are formalized communication routes where an athlete records goals, challenges, out-of-practice training logs, successes, failures, and critically, their feelings about wins and losses. This whole process forces a kind of profound self-discovery and performance optimization. It lets the athlete link their mental and physical states directly to their outcomes, which confirms that they are the primary decision maker in optimizing their own preparation.
That's a compelling point about self-reflection. But I'm just not convinced that self-reflection, left unchecked, leads to optimal results. Productive self-reflection, I believe, requires an objective structure and accountability, both provided by the coach. The coach's role is to be that clear, objective decision maker, completely distinct from a parent, a friend, or even a mentor.
But why must the coach be the central authority figure in what is ultimately internal growth? Why not just a guide?
Because the athlete's effort has to be externally directed and validated. Otherwise, you risk vanity metrics or, focusing on perceived weaknesses that aren't actually hindering the team's success. Improvement demands that an athlete be highly coachable, open to feedback, and willing to learn from mistakes. The team environment itself enforces ownership through clear delegation and immediate consequence. These are essential life skills. We see this philosophy in the insistence that while athletes do most of the work, they must also try doing what your coach told you to do the first time. This just underscores that essential authority structure you need to maintain a focused, high-performing training environment. Compliance has to come before customization.
I accept the need for clear direction in a team setting, sure. But let's shift to defining productive improvement itself, because this really gets to the heart of the matter. If we focus on individual ownership, the core skill is a kind of sophisticated self-assessment right after practice, totally regardless of the coach's feedback. The athlete has to ask, with ruthless honesty, what went well? Where did I get complacent? What was genuinely challenging today?
Okay, but how does that internal feeling translate into a measurable gain?
Because that personal awareness dictates everything, it allows the elite athlete to structure their entire ecosystem, their diet, their strength training focus, their mental practice, all based on their specific internally measured needs for that day or that week. The self-evaluation informs the next step before the coach even gives them a plan. It's proactive adaptation, not reactive. They recognize that their daily activities are the variables they can actually control to achieve success.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that internal feeling should be the ultimate arbiter of performance correction. Self-evaluation is just so prone to bias. Improvement must be measured against objective external reality. Coaches aren't relying on feel. They're using advanced performance analysis tools, video software, data-driven decisions. They track statistics like hitting efficiency against specific block formations or serve percentage in high-leverage moments.
That objective data is crucial, I agree, but it only presents a symptom. It tells you what happened, your serve percentage dropped, but it doesn't tell the athlete why they choked on that specific serve or how to change the underlying approach to that high-pressure moment.
No, but the data tells us precisely what skill execution or strategic deployment needs correction. We use data to separate failure into objective categories. This lets error correction be targeted specifically at execution, footwork, contact point, strategy, and it explicitly avoids targeting personal attributes. The coach can address a technical flaw without getting into some subjective character analysis. That separation is absolutely key to professional growth.
But if the structure is entirely external and prescribed, does it truly force the kind of holistic growth that's required for elite status? Look at Karch Kiraly's pivot to beach volleyball. He said the beach game forced me to be a much better all-around player. That environment of total immersion and personal necessity, that's intrinsic pressure. It drove a broader, more comprehensive skill acquisition than a purely prescribed, specialized court training regimen ever could. The environment demanded self-reliance in every single facet of the game.
But that self-reliance still happened within a defined, rigorous competitive structure. And that brings us directly to the function of external discipline. That structure is necessary because an athlete's will has to be channeled and enforced. The dissenter perspective is that these accountability mechanisms are they're non-negotiable for translating desire into collective action.
Okay, give me a tangible, high-stakes example of how that external enforcement trumps individual responsibility.
All right, look at team accountability mechanisms in practice. If one player routinely forgets their required equipment, a practice ball, a resistance band, whatever, the coach might make the entire team run conditioning drills, the notorious dive lines. This uses the group dynamic to instill discipline and enforce that external standard. The coach, by acting as the consistent, powerful dictator, maintains the sanctity of that limited practice time. They protect the collective opportunity for improvement from one person's negligence.
With that kind of external imposition, it often risks stifling genuine, proactive ownership. It turns preparation into an obligation that's enforced by fear of communal punishment rather than an internal value. True accountability comes from embracing difficulty, knowing that adversity, if you allow it to, will fortify you. Athletes have to learn to take ownership of their own gear and their practice prep because that is a rehearsal for taking ownership of their performance under pressure.
But the communal accountability ensures the individual recognizes their tangible impact on the system. If they fail the team, they understand the cost of their lapse. I mean, Russ Rose, one of the most successful coaches in the game, he supports this. He said, "You're either getting better or getting worse. I don't think you stay the same in sports. If we want to achieve something special, those players have to recognize that they're responsible every day for getting better."
Right, but that quote speaks to responsibility, the internal decision to apply continuous effort. The coach's system merely provides the path for that responsibility. If a parent is constantly reminding their kid to pack their gear, the athlete never internalizes the process. Instead, parents should be told to empower your athlete to take ownership of managing their equipment. That small logistical task is part of them carrying the bulk of the responsibility for their career. Self-management of equipment is a micro skill for the self-management of a match.
I'm just not convinced that managing one's socks translates directly into managing a Game 5 pressure point.
The coaching staff is responsible for creating the high-pressure situation where the application of that responsibility is tested and where failure has real immediate consequences.
Okay, let's shift the discussion to the mental realm, because this is where that internal commitment truly shines. Cultivating mental resilience. I'd argue that resilience is actively cultivated through internal techniques that happen entirely within the athlete's own mind.
Techniques like what exactly?
Well, techniques like visualization. And it's not just seeing yourself executing perfect skills. That's a bit naive. True visualization is rehearsing the response to inevitable failure. It's seeing the block get stuffed, immediately regaining your composure, and then perfectly executing the very next play. It is mental preparedness that's achieved by focusing entirely on what is within one's control, your effort, your preparation, your mindset, regardless of the score or the crowd.
That's fascinating, but resilience, in the competitive, winning sense of the word, is only demonstrated by reacting correctly to external pressures and setbacks within that high-stakes environment. Elite athletes are tough because they recover quickly from their own mistakes and are not be affected by aspects of the game they cannot control, like debatable referee calls, stadium noise, or chatter across the net.
But the ability to ignore that external noise is built on solid internal knowledge, on routine. If you are internally optimized, the external chaos becomes almost irrelevant.
I disagree. That toughness is learned by navigating those high-pressure situations within the coach's structured system. Setbacks aren't just moments for quiet reflection. They are opportunities for learning and growth that have to be immediately corrected on the court, under stress. The coach manufactures the stress that tests the limits of that internal visualization.
Well, let's bring back the journaling evidence we talked about earlier. The journals that athletes gain powerful insights into how different foods, sleep patterns, or pregame rituals help them perform to the best of their ability. This is internalized optimization. The athlete is linking deep self-reflection to measurable physical outcomes. It proves that the most sophisticated form of improvement is self-driven optimization of the human machine itself. A coach can't track metabolic function the way the athlete can track their own energy levels relative to their diet logs.
That internal data is valuable, yes, but it exists to serve the external system. You optimize your sleep and diet so you can perform optimally when the coach requires you to execute the system in a tournament. The self-awareness is the data input, the coach's system is the validation output. If your self-optimized diet doesn't improve your hitting efficiency according to the objective film analysis, well then the effort was wasted.
So you're arguing that self-awareness is merely preparation for external compliance. I'm arguing that self-awareness is the precursor to sustained personal excellence.
And I'm arguing that the coach provides the objective mirror and the demanding environment that makes that self-awareness effective and competitively viable.
To reiterate my position then, while external guidance is necessary, successful improvement ultimately rests on the individual athlete's capacity for sustained, self-driven effort and reflection. The athlete has to accept that their ultimate competition is internal, striving to be better today than they were yesterday. And by utilizing tools like specific goal setting and self-assessment, they chart their own path. The preparation, as the source material highlights, is a choice only the athlete can fully commit to and execute.
And to affirm my view, while internal will is the starting point, the structures of high-level coaching, the clear distinction of roles, the objective feedback loop from video and data analysis, and the consistent enforcement of rigorous team standards, these are what translate that raw will into actionable, measurable progress. These external challenges and non-negotiable standards are what transform reflective self-drive into competitive, repeatable success.
The sustained pursuit of excellence, therefore, really requires a complex and ongoing interplay. The foundational internal commitment of the athlete has to continually seek out and meet the precise, structured demands of a high-level training environment.
Exactly. The athlete must own their journey, but they rely on that external structure to verify and direct that ownership toward the highest competitive goals. Both personal ownership and rigorous external challenge are without a doubt vital components of the elite athlete's path forward.